So what is flow? I mean, we're talking about the 30-day flow challenge. We want to give you a little bit of insight in terms of what flow is and why it's so critical for us in today's era, and I think in the future, because there's a lot of things happening, a lot of challenges happening for all of us, whether it be changes in job, change in the environment, change, just all kinds of changes. And the value of flow, at least from my perspective, Damon, is really by teaching people how to access it. Again, understanding their nervous system, developing that not only emotional intelligence, but kind of the cognitive intelligence around how our nervous system works. We're going to be able to kind of move into these challenges with a little bit more grace, a little bit more intentionality, and the ability to really show up in a way that allows people to kind of get through whatever is coming in front of them. So going back to that, discovering the next best step. But I just, what is flow to you?
Well, I mean, through the scientific lens, I'm thinking about the physiology, the psychology, and the neurobiology, and how important it is for us to be able to kind of find ways to cultivate and up level and optimize those parts of ourselves. To me, flow is that state. Again, we talked a little bit about stress management, time management, but we're talking about state management here. And flow is the optimal state of consciousness. And so, it's not hyperbole to say that it's when we feel our best and perform our best. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're up, winning gold medals or, hucking ourselves off the mountain. It's really, to me, it's the best representation of myself when I'm in flow. And that when I'm in flow and I am taking the next best step, I can feel proud of the things that I accomplished. I can feel proud of how I showed up. And also I can feel that sense of peace and calm in my nervous system where everything really starts to generate from.
Right. And the founder, the father of flow, the science of flow, is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which, try to say that name 10 times really fast. It's really difficult. But I think the other part of what we're trying to do here is this idea of this challenge. And I love the quote here around the voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. This goes back to, again, as we say, you being you stepping into you, and really start to make some choices knowing that you're in control of you. That's why the gamification of this exercise is so powerful, is that ultimately you become your own avatar, and to really be aware of how you're navigating through the next 30 days, because you've chosen to be a part of this as a community. And I just really think that that's where the power will come as people begin to progress through this particular challenge. At least in the level 1 course, it's been pretty profound to witness how people are making a choice, and it's voluntary, and it's adding value to who they want to be. I think you talked earlier before we started recording around, who do you want to be at the end of these 30 days? And I think it's a really important question to say, am I being who I want to be? It's not what do I need to do or what do I have to, it's what do I want to be? And the work that I do with organizations and teams as well is I always ask, if you feel good, do you not perform better? And everyone's like, duh. And I really do feel that getting back to what it means to be my best and to feel my best so I can do my best in that moment is really such a profound skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Csikszentmihalyi is happy when people call him Mike. So, Mike is, if you're struggling with that name, Mike is perfectly acceptable. But flow is our birthright. And that's the other part that I really want to highlight here. We're wired for flow. We've all been in flow. Every single one of you listening to this at some point in time has experienced flow. I think what we're doing is we're putting a scientific template and a name to some of those experiences that you have that you feel great within. And so I want to make that really clear that this isn't unattainable. This is not only is it your birthright, it's something that we can engineer. So of the skills and the activities that we have developed are specifically for the ability for you to get yourself and cultivate the conditions for flow. And personally, I think that the world right now, to be able to kind of solve big problems, to deal with a lot of the exponential change that's going on, this is a really powerful and helpful way for us to kind of get there first, and then kind of be creative off of that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what is flow and the stages of flow as we go into this. And so the first phase of flow is the struggle phase. And I think for me, this is the one that, many years ago, I used to do the team building and ropes courses, and we used to say how suffering is optional. And I think through the research and through the work in the flow science and neuroscience is realizing that struggling and suffering is not an option. We all are struggling, and it's not about beating yourself up if something's not going your way, because again, we have these kind of weird rules in our world. But I'm really trying to make struggling, normalize it. It's okay to struggle. And so when we talk about struggle, it doesn't feel good. And I think this is when people can start to give up. Even if you're struggling within the next 30 days, it's okay to struggle. It's okay to not, put 100% into your day. It's okay. And yet this is where sometimes recognizing that I'm struggling, what is that next best step for me to do right now? So, part of the design and part of flow is having to struggle. And I think a lot of people, in my experience, Damon, have not been really good about accepting the struggle. They just want to kind of like, it shouldn't be like this. I must be broken if I'm struggling, or must be something wrong with me. And it's like, nope, it's normal. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add to this one.
Yeah, many of you might know Carol Dweck's work with growth mindset. And one of the key components of the growth mindset wasn't that the people who were in more of a growth mindset were more talented, for example, at math. It's that when they saw a hard problem, they got a little glint in their eye. They got a little smile on their face. They rolled up their sleeves, and they went into the struggle with positive kind of emotional state. So the real issue here isn't about what being optional. Struggle is not optional. What's optional is whether we get frustrated. What's optional is whether we can start to retrain ourselves to see and feel that struggle and realize that, hey, I'm onto something here. So really what we want you to do is kind of lean in a little bit to some of those uncomfortable spaces and see if you can kind of stay there for a minute. One way that I typically frame it is I have people try to like reach down and touch their toes. And unless you're a yogi, most of us end up kind of getting to that place where our hamstrings start to bite. And what that reminds me of this phase. When the hamstrings bite as I'm trying to touch my toes, if we can stay there for a pause, if we can relax while we're in a little bit of that struggle, oftentimes we can go just a little bit farther.
Right.
So that's kind of the imagery I want you to think about when you think of this front end of the flow cycle.
Which also speaks to the idea of just the release phase, just that idea to pause and, you get to that moment of struggle, breathe, release, and it takes you a little bit further. So it's when you accept it, you accept the challenge, you accept the struggle. And this is where you're moving stuff from the conscious to the non-conscious. And I think this is what I found is that our bodies have an amazing capacity to do things. I was with Wim Hof climbing a mountain in snow with just shorts and boots and in 5-degree weather, so I know what the body can do when we allow it to do what it knows how to do, what to do. And I think that's part of the release phase. And so it's such a great metaphor of that stretch coming to that point, releasing. And so these are the first two, and again, all of this is neurochemistry. All of this is a chemical kind of interaction with happening within your body. Each phase of these, there's something going on neurobiologically, physiologically. The fourth phase is ultimately, or that third phase is flow. And this is that zone that I think, as you said, a lot of people have experienced. And what we want to do over the next 30 days is give people those skill sets. And then finally we get into the recovery and just speak to this one, Damon, because just like I'm a real proponent of helping people be okay with struggle, I know that you've been really, poignant with me and kind of coaching me on how to recover more effectively as well.
Well, recovery is where we grow. And I think that in our, the last 30, 50 years in our culture, we've used phrases like, power through and, just grind through and you sleep when you're dead. These kind of macho type of phrases. Well, what high level sports really realized was, and then neuroscience has backed it up across the spectrum, is that recovery is where all that we're really doing the wiring. It's where we're growing. And, as I mentioned earlier, we're wired for this. And there are three main facets of really making real change in the brain. The first one is urgency or agitation. So if we're struggling, as you can see in this first phase, there's a lot of that just agitation and, you know, kind of banging your head against the wall type of feeling. The second one is deep focus. So if we can kind of train our attention to, in this case, release and allow ourselves to kind of move off the topic or the task for a little while and let that unconscious really have its say, then we get into that flow phase. But flow is also very addictive. And what typically happens is we all want to scramble right back into flow. Another thing that's not optional is the recovery phase. We must recover. So in my model of urgency, focus, the third phase is rest. So whether that's active recovery throughout the course of your day, taking a few minutes to do a little breath practice, taking a few minutes to connect with a colleague, taking a few minutes to take a walk around the block or do some simple stretching, whether it's grabbing a glass of water, whether it's having really great sleep hygiene. We know that this recovery phase is where we restock the chemicals, but it's also where our body starts to consolidate all that learning and all that wonderful stuff that just happened. So this is a non-negotiable. It's the two bookends that Scott and I feel very strongly about, really kind of honing our attention on.
Right, which is really the 30 days is really developing strategies on how to struggle more effectively and how to recover more efficiently. And again, these are non-negotiables. And that's what we're hoping, at least I don't think we're hoping, we're starting to prove that when people are able to develop good strategies around struggle and good strategies around recovery, they will definitely be able to recalibrate their nervous system to be able to navigate each day, each moment with a little bit more grace and a little bit more, I guess you could say, effectiveness. Not that it's a race, it's just recognizing that we have to maintain our state to be effective with our families, with our communities, and with ourselves generally. So
yeah, and willpower is fleeting. So when as Scott's mentioning good strategies, you know, the real reason for good strategies and why this 30-day challenge is so effective is we're building habits. And once something is habituated, we don't have to use energy to do it any longer. So just as you wake up in the morning and brush your teeth and take a shower, that's not taking willpower. That's something that you've habituated. That's what the good strategies are going to do for you. And just imagine if you didn't have to spend, you know, precious energy and willpower figuring out how to struggle more effectively and figuring out how to recover more efficiently. Imagine if they were just built into your life. And that's really the elegance and the power of this 30-day challenge.
Yeah, great. Thank you. On our next session, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those flow triggers. So we'll see you in a bit.